The most shocking truth about loneliness today is that you don't feel alone because you lack people. You feel alone because the world has quietly rewired your brain to be surrounded by everyone and connected to no one. And if you stay for the next 15 seconds, you're going to see exactly how modern life has been engineered to make you feel emotionally isolated even when you're physically crowded. You scroll through endless faces, voices, opinions, and highlights, yet feel more unseen, unheard, and disconnected than any generation before you. Because the modern world gives you constant contact but no real connection, constant noise but no real intimacy, constant stimulation but no real belonging, trapping you in a psychological paradox where you are drowning in interaction yet starving for emotional closeness. Loneliness today isn't a lack of people, it's the inability to feel bonded to them, a silent emotional numbness that creeps in slowly, quietly, and invisibly until you begin to question whether anyone truly understands you, whether anyone genuinely values you, and whether your existence actually matters to anyone on the planet. Most people think loneliness is about being physically by yourself, but psychologists know the real danger lies in being emotionally alone, even while surrounded by others, because that type of loneliness doesn't just hurt. You carry it like a fracture inside your mind that never fully heals, shaping how you think, how you love, how you trust, and how you see the world. You can sit next to someone and still feel invisible. You can talk to someone and feel unheard. You can love someone and feel unloved. You can have hundreds of contacts and feel like you have no one. This is the modern loneliness, a psychological divide between your inner world and the world around you, created by a culture that prioritizes speed over depth, convenience over connection, attention over affection, and performance over presence. The brain wasn't designed for this, because for thousands of years, humans survived in small tribes where every person mattered, every voice counted, and every connection was essential. And your nervous system evolved around closeness, touch, shared presence, eye contact, and mutual reliance, things almost completely removed from your daily life today. Instead, you wake up to screens, messages, alerts, algorithms, pressure, comparison, and endless noise, none of which provide the emotional signals your brain needs to feel bonded, safe, or valued. And the result is a generation of people who live in constant connection, yet feel emotionally abandoned. You're surrounded by communication, but deprived of intimacy. Surrounded by entertainment, but deprived of meaning. Surrounded by options, but deprived of genuine affection. Surrounded by opinions, but deprived of understanding. And the scariest part is that you've grown so used to this emotional starvation that you've started to convince yourself it's normal, telling yourself you're just introverted, just busy, just tired, or just focused. When the truth is that you're carrying a psychological ache that comes from unmet emotional needs you've been taught to suppress rather than acknowledge. Modern loneliness doesn't arrive with dramatic breakdowns or obvious sadness. It arrives with subtle symptoms like chronic overthinking, emotional withdrawal, social exhaustion, difficulty trusting people, feeling misunderstood, and a constant sense of being out of place no matter where you go. You start cancelling plans because being around people feels draining. You stop sharing things because you feel like no one cares. You retreat into your mind because the outside world feels overwhelming. You build walls because vulnerability feels like danger. You exist behind a mask because the real you feels too fragile to expose. And the more disconnected you feel, the more you isolate. And the more you isolate, the more disconnected you feel, creating a psychological loop that silently erodes your emotional resilience, your self-worth, and your ability to build meaningful relationships. But what most people never realize is that modern loneliness isn't just emotional. It's neurological, because your brain is constantly measuring whether you belong, whether you matter, and whether you are socially safe. And when it doesn't receive those signals, it activates the same survival pathways that fire during physical danger. Your heart races, your energy drops, your mind spirals, your confidence collapses, your motivation dies. Loneliness doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. It changes how you interpret people's behavior, making you assume rejection even when none exists. It makes you misread neutral expressions as negative ones. It makes you underestimate your value and overestimate others' indifference. It makes you cling too tightly or detach too quickly. It makes relationships feel terrifying even when you crave them. Loneliness reshapes your identity. It turns your mind into a maze of second-guessing and doubt. It convinces you that you're too much or not enough. It blinds you to the fact that millions of people feel exactly the same way. Because in the modern world, loneliness is no longer an individual problem. It's a global psychological epidemic created by technology, culture, society, and the slow erosion of authentic human connection. People don't reach out anymore because everyone assumes everyone else is busy. People don't call anymore because texting feels safer. People don't meet in person because digital interaction is easier. People don't deepen relationships because surface-level bonds require less emotional effort. People don't express vulnerability because everyone fears judgment. And so everyone silently suffers under the illusion that they are the only one feeling disconnected, when the truth is that the modern world is full of people walking around with invisible emotional bruises, all pretending to be fine, all hiding the same aching loneliness behind curated smiles and filtered lives. You live in a world where vulnerability is discouraged, where emotional needs are labeled as weakness, where busyness is used as a shield, where independence is idolized, and where being self-contained is treated like a badge of honor, even though humans were never meant to navigate life alone. But the most dangerous part of modern loneliness is this: when you feel emotionally isolated for long enough, you begin to isolate by choice, not because you don't want connection, but because loneliness tricks you into believing you're safer without it. You pull back. You stop opening up. You retreat into comfort zones. You avoid new relationships. You convince yourself you don't need anyone. And that's how loneliness becomes self-reinforcing, not by pushing people away, but by convincing you that people won't stay. Yet the truth is that your loneliness is not your fault. It's the result of living in a world where everything is designed for convenience, consumption, and speed. But almost nothing is designed for emotional depth, authenticity, or genuine human bonding. But if you stay with me through the next sections, you'll understand exactly how the modern world conditions you into loneliness, how your nervous system interprets isolation, why digital connection intensifies emotional disconnection, and how to break the loneliness cycle, even if you've been stuck in it for years. The strangest part about loneliness in the modern world is that it doesn't attack you all at once, but instead leaks into your life slowly, silently, and deceptively, turning into a psychological fog that surrounds you so gradually that you don't even realize you've been breathing it in until the day you wake up and something inside you feels permanently muted, as if your emotions have been wrapped in cotton and your instincts have been locked behind a door you can no longer find. You start to notice it in tiny moments, like when you open your phone for the 10th time in an hour, not because you're expecting anything, but because you're trying to escape the flicker of emptiness you don't want to admit is growing inside your chest. And this simple reflex tells you a secret about human behavior that no one likes to confront. That loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of being emotionally seen, understood, and connected in a world that has replaced genuine interaction with endless stimulation. Modern loneliness is psychological quicksand because your brain can't tell the difference between social abundance and social starvation when you're scrolling through faces, voices, and lives that don't actually know you. And so even though you are surrounded by digital evidence of human presence, your mind remains trapped in a state of deprivation, constantly searching for connection and constantly failing to achieve it, which quietly rewires your self-worth without you realizing it. We live in a time where millions of people talk every day, but almost no one truly listens. Where friendships fade, not from anger, but from distraction. Where people connect through mirrors of themselves rather than the truth of themselves. And the result is a form of psychological fragmentation, where you feel present in your life, but disconnected from your role in it. Like a background character trying to convince yourself that you're still part of the story. And what makes this even darker is that loneliness isn't just an emotion anymore. It has become a business model, a market, a strategy used by platforms and industries that rely on your sense of isolation to keep you engaged, scrolling, buying, watching, and hoping. Because the more lonely you feel, the more attention you give away in your search for relief. And this creates a cycle where your psychological hunger becomes someone else's financial fuel. This is why you can sit in a room full of people and still feel like you're disappearing. Why you can talk to someone you care about and still feel unheard. Why conversations feel shallower. Why connections feel temporary. Why relationships break faster. And why your mind whispers the same dark question over and over again. Why do I feel alone even when I'm not? A question that scares you, not because you don't know the answer, but because deep down you do. Your brain is wired for tribal closeness, emotional resonance, shared vulnerability, and physical presence. But the modern world feeds it digital illusions, social fragments, and relationships built on temporary interactions. And so the part of your mind designed to bond, attach, and trust is now starving, confused, and overstimulated, trying to navigate a world where human connection has been replaced with human performance. You start filtering yourself to fit in, adjusting your tone, your opinions, your personality, not because you're fake, but because you're frightened of being misunderstood. And ironically, the more you try to be liked, the more disconnected you feel. Because every version of yourself that isn't the real you intensifies the loneliness you're trying to escape. This is the psychological trap no one talks about. That loneliness in the modern world is often self-protective, a defense mechanism, a subconscious withdrawal from overstimulation, from judgment, from exhaustion, from masks you're tired of wearing. And so you isolate, not because you want to be alone, but because your mind doesn't trust the world around it anymore. And the darkest truth of all is this: loneliness today is not a condition. It's an environment, a place we've been trained to live in, a quiet psychological cage disguised as convenience, technology, and choice. And unless you learn how to rebuild connection deliberately, thoughtfully, and internally, you may spend your entire life surrounded by people, yet never truly feel found by anyone at all. The most unsettling part about loneliness in the modern world is that the longer you live with it, the more your brain begins to accept it as normal, carving new neural pathways that convince you solitude is safer than connection, silence is easier than vulnerability, and emotional distance is more predictable than letting someone close enough to hurt you, which means loneliness doesn't just change your mood, it changes your identity. You begin to develop a strange emotional numbness, a kind of psychological callus that forms not because you're strong, but because you've been unprotected for so long that your mind had to harden itself to survive. And this numbness becomes dangerous because it stops you from reaching out, stops you from trusting, stops you from believing you deserve connection, and eventually convinces you that isolation is a personality trait rather than a warning sign. When loneliness sits inside you long enough, it reshapes your perception of relationships, making you suspicious when someone is kind, uncomfortable when someone cares, and overwhelmed when someone tries to truly understand you, because your mind has become so accustomed to emptiness that emotional closeness feels unfamiliar, unstable, and almost threatening, like stepping into a warm room after freezing outside for too long. This is why so many people push others away without meaning to, sabotage genuine connections without realizing it, or suddenly withdraw when things start to feel real. Because loneliness teaches your brain a dangerous lesson, that losing people hurts, but letting them in hurts more. And so you protect yourself with distance, with silence, with walls that grow higher each year until you're trapped behind them without knowing how to come back out. You start confusing independence with isolation, boundaries with avoidance, and I prefer to be alone with I've forgotten how to be close to anyone. And the scariest part is that this shift happens quietly, subtly, beneath your awareness, until one day you look at your life and realize how many friendships faded, how many opportunities dissolved, and how many emotional connections you never allowed yourself to experience because loneliness convinced you that you were safer on your own. Modern loneliness doesn't just remove people from your life. It removes version after version of yourself, stripping away your social instincts, your emotional openness, your ability to read warmth in others, replacing them with hypervigilance, self-doubt, and a constant low-level fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or disappointed again. And this fear becomes so automatic that you don't even question it anymore. And the most tragic irony is that lonely people often appear the most self-sufficient, the most composed, the most unbothered, because the world rewards emotional independence so much that you start hiding your need for connection, even from yourself, building a life that looks stable on the outside while you quietly shrink on the inside, convincing yourself you don't need anyone while secretly hoping someone might still choose you anyway. Loneliness also rewires your reward system, making quick digital interactions more appealing than deeper conversations, making superficial comfort feel easier than emotional intimacy, and making distraction more soothing than honesty, creating a life where you can talk to hundreds of people online, but still feel as if not one of them truly knows who you are beneath the persona you've built to survive. The modern world has taught us to fear vulnerability so intensely that we treat connection like a gamble instead of a necessity, forgetting that the human mind was never designed to function without belonging, without touch, without shared presence. And when these needs go unmet, your thoughts grow louder, your fears grow stronger, and your mind slowly becomes a place you avoid instead of a place you inhabit. The darkest truth about loneliness is that it doesn't just make you feel alone. It makes you feel invisible, irrelevant, and replaceable. And these feelings accumulate like dust inside your psyche until one day you wake up and realize the person you've become is a quieter, dimmer, more guarded version of the person you were meant to be, shaped not by lack of people, but by lack of connection. And unless you break the cycle, loneliness becomes the architect of your entire emotional life. The final and most devastating layer of modern loneliness is that even when you recognize the emptiness, even when you feel the ache of wanting someone, even when you know you're isolated, taking the first step out of loneliness feels impossibly heavy, because your mind has learned to mistrust closeness so deeply that connection feels like danger instead of healing, making the very solution feel like the very threat you're trying to escape. It becomes a psychological paradox where you crave connection but fear it, where you long for people but avoid them, where you want to open up but feel safer hiding. And this tug of war inside you becomes its own form of suffering, pulling you backward every time you try to move forward, making you wonder if you're broken when really you're just wounded in a place no one can see. The truth is that loneliness in the modern world is no longer just a lack of people. It's the collision of overstimulation, emotional exhaustion, digital numbing, social distrust, and a generation raised to be hyper-independent, hyper-distracted, and hyper-anxious. And when all of these forces combine, they create a life where you're surrounded by noise, yet starved of intimacy, connected to everyone, yet bonded to no one, visible online, yet unseen in reality. And despite what people pretend, loneliness does not make you stronger. It makes you quieter, smaller, more distant from your own needs, teaching you to settle for the crumbs of connection instead of demanding the depth your soul was built for. And this settling becomes a slow emotional decay that feels normal because everyone else around you is decaying too, just at different speeds and in different ways. You begin to fear bothering people, fear taking up space, fear being misunderstood, and these small fears accumulate until your entire personality becomes shaped by avoidance, molded around silence, and sculpted by the belief that you don't deserve the same emotional nourishment everyone else seems to receive effortlessly, even though you've never actually been unworthy, only unsupported. What the modern world never teaches you is that loneliness doesn't break you suddenly. It erodes you gradually, like water carving stone, wearing down your confidence, your optimism, your emotional hunger, until you're left with a version of yourself who speaks less, tries less, hopes less, and feels less. And no one notices the transformation because you've learned to hide it behind humor, busyness, or the illusion of independence. Loneliness can even warp your memory, making you rewrite your past as if you were always alone, as if you were always the outsider, as if you were always the quiet one, when in reality you might have once been open, expressive, trusting, until enough disappointments and silences taught you to retreat inward. And now the world only knows the hardened version of you, not the person who still lives buried underneath the emotional armor you built to survive. The worst part is that loneliness tricks you into believing that no one would understand what you're going through, when statistically, almost everyone around you is experiencing the same quiet suffering, the same private emptiness, the same emotional fatigue. But because everyone hides it to appear stable, successful, or unbothered, we collectively starve in silence while pretending we're full. And what makes loneliness so difficult to escape is that it doesn't ask for permission before it becomes your normal. And once it does, connection becomes something you have to relearn, rebuild, and reintroduce into your life. Like a foreign language you used to be fluent in, but somehow forgot after years of not speaking it, stumbling over the unfamiliar syllables of trust, closeness, vulnerability, and presence. Yet despite all of this, despite the psychological scars, the emotional numbness, the fear of letting people close, the truth is that loneliness is not your identity. It is only your environment, and environments can be changed, even if slowly, even if painfully, even if it feels unnatural at first, because your mind still remembers how to connect, your heart still remembers how to feel, and somewhere inside you, beneath the layers of distance and self-protection, the part of you that was built for belonging is still alive, still waiting, still hoping that someday you will choose to step out of the isolation you never deserved and into the connection you were always meant to have. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful or eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more practical psychology insights, self-awareness tools, and mind-sharpening advice. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.